This is Chasing the Horizon, a podcast by, for, and about motorcyclists, brought to you by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America and Web Bike World. Welcome to episode 132. I'm your host, Wes Fleming, and our guests this time are Bill and Susan Dragoo, journalists, travelers, and more. Many of us around the world love to go to motorcycle trade shows. It's a great opportunity to see what's new in motorcycling, mingle with a crowd of like-minded folks, and more. The pandemic served as a global interruption for trade shows, but here in the U.S., one group found a way to deal with it. The Progressive IMS, where Progressive is the sponsor and IMS stands for International Motorcycle Show, even though they weren't international at all, moved 100% outdoors in 2021 to deal with the pandemic and the need for social distancing. They altered their schedule to focus on summer and fall events and just kept right on going. Well, that all comes to a halt, but only for 2022 if you believe the press release. IMS organizers announced on the 9th of May 2022 they would be, quote, suspending their events for the rest of the year, despite having announced the 8-city schedule only about 6 weeks prior and already selling tickets for the events. In 2021, IMS says over 35,000 motorcycle demo rides took place at their outdoor events, and almost half the people taking those demo rides were either new to riding or prospective new riders. Things don't really look all that great for the IMS in 2023. Their press release said, and I'm quoting here, "We hope to bring back the tour at some point in the future, but for now, we say goodbye and thank you for your attendance over the years," end quote. As somebody who attended numerous IMS events over the years, I can tell you that my personal experience was that the event was in decline in general, at least the one that they held indoors in Washington, D.C. Attendance was down every year, and fewer manufacturers attended over time, with more retailers showing up to hawk their wares. I mean, at the last IMS I went to before the pandemic shut everything down, I bought a new beard comb. Yeah, that's what was being sold at a motorcycle show, alongside the acres of pin and patch booths and the booths hawking cheaply made imitation helmets, jackets, and gloves. Now, I loved actually the idea of IMS outdoors, but unfortunately last year my schedule didn't allow me to go to the nearest one in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which was still over 200 miles away. To avoid DC traffic and get there would have taken me probably close to 4 hours one way. So couple a 4-hour ride, hopefully, with, several hours spending time with demo rides, and you're probably looking at an overnight stay, which ups the cost, et cetera, et cetera. At any rate, I guess we won't know if IMS comes back until next year. But with the U.S. economy seemingly pointed at another recession, it's going to be really tough for them to recover from a year off, especially since when they're not holding events, they're not generating any revenue. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
Electricity, 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 electricity.
Simon Bertram posted a fantastic piece about the state of the electric motorcycle industry over on Web Bike World, our news partner. I'll summarize it a little for you, but if you're at all interested in electric motorcycles, visit the show notes page for this episode and get the link and read the whole thing for yourself. It's really quite well done. Part of Bertram's theory is that motorcyclists are more conservative than car drivers when it comes to their willingness to purchase a new vehicle. Actually, the term he used is discerning. So saying conservative is a little interpretation on my part, but I think we're both right. You can have a weird car that sells pretty well because it's new technology and exciting, but weird motorcycles don't sell well. For examples, I offer up the BMW R1200C, a cruiser that nobody expected from the iconic German brand. And then there's the Yamaha GTS 1000, a sport touring bike with a single-sided swing arm on the front of the bike instead of a telescopic fork. And now I have a twofer, two examples of leaning two-in-front trikes, the MP3 from Piaggio and the Niken from Yamaha. All of these bikes are cool, but they didn't sell well when they were out. As a matter of fact, sales of the GTS 1000 were absolutely dismal, and the R1200C is still widely and regularly ridiculed by BMW fanatics all over the world. Now, the MP3 and the Niken, they're cute, they're interesting, they're fantastic technology. Nobody buys them. Now, Bertram rightly calls Harley-Davidson out for their Livewire in his article, and the Livewire was a really exciting development, but it was underpowered and overpriced when it finally came to market. This process then inspired Harley to dump the entire concept of electric motorcycles like a hot rock, and they spun off the entire electric division into a separate company that we haven't heard much from lately, and I expect they'll allow to simply fail quietly and fade into obscurity. Now, there is Zero, but they were the first mass-market electric motorcycle company, and that comes with its own problems and hurdles, both real and imagined. I guess I should say real and perceived. We've got Damon's new Hypersport to look forward to, but none of us really know if it's going to be enough to keep the electric motorcycle industry, especially in the US, moving forward. Thank you very much to the folks at Web Bike World for helping us get you the latest news about the motorcycle industry. Be sure to check out their website at webbikeworld.com for the latest motorcycle news and in-depth product reviews. Joining me this time around are Bill and Susan Dragoo. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff, including motorcycle training, the Overland Expo, and exactly why Susan is in Oklahoma. Welcome to the show, guys. How you doing?
Hey, Wes. Thanks for having us. Boy, you started a hornet's nest there.
We're doing great. Thank you.
Now, one of the things that I always like to find out from my guests is how they got involved in motorcycles. And since there's two of you, there's likely two different stories. So, Susan, do you want to start off and tell us a little bit about how you got into
Sure. I was the child of a motorcyclist and motorcycle mechanic. I guess I still am. And so I don't even remember my first motorcycle ride. I just remember always being on a motorcycle with my dad. And then as a young teenager, learned to ride on my own and rode while I was a teenager. The usual, rode dirt bikes as a kid and had fun riding the Trail 70s and the mopeds, trying to climb hills on mopeds, riding the neighborhood boys Honda CB100s around the neighborhood streets and that sort of thing. So loved it as a young teenager. Then I really didn't do much of it until later in life. And when I met Bill, he was the essence of a motorcyclist and as well as a motorcycle mechanic. And that was definitely a thing that was of interest to me. And although it was a little bit scary to me at first because I hadn't been on a motorcycle in quite some time at that point, it was a lot of fun. Our first date was on his Harley Dynasport, and the rest was history in that regard. It wasn't long before I got my own bike, and I went through a series of motorcycles and had a BMW F650 GS that was one of my favorite bikes, but I ended up selling that for a camera body because I was really developing more of an interest in my writing and photography and that sort of thing. So it's something that I love to do, but I'm not doing a lot of right now. And just enjoy being involved with our training classes and at Overland Expo and pursuing some of the other things that I'm interested in.
Yeah, when you were a kid and motorcycles were a part of your family, were there a lot of other girls that were riding at the time, or were you kind of the only one that you knew that rode, dirt bikes and palled around the neighborhood on motorcycles and stuff like that?
Oh, actually, there were other girls that would ride around on those Trail 70s. One of the girls that I was in junior high with, she had Trail 70s, and so we rode around the park on those. But in my neighborhood, I think I was probably the only girl that was riding the Hondas and I always remember trying to ride those mopeds up a hill and bumping them, and it was loads of fun. But yeah, I didn't consider myself unique at that point, but maybe I was.
Yeah. What kind of bikes did your dad work on? Also
loved Japanese bikes.
Okay.
Hondas and Yamahas primarily. And he actually had a motorcycle dealership at one point where he sold Bridgestone motorcycles. That was in the very early 70s.
I did know that they're a Japanese company, but I didn't realize they sold motorcycles. I thought they only sold tires and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've got a photo of my dad teaching me to ride a Bridgestone 125 when I was 13. That was probably my first solo ride on a motorcycle.
Very cool. So, Bill, let's throw you the same question. How did you did you have a similar path to motorcycles as Susan? You started as a kid on dirt bikes, or did you have a different path?
Well, I started, my first ride, I was 5 years old and rode on the back of the first Norman police officers, motorcycle cops, Harley Davidson. And, that really fired things up for me. I watched, as I sat on the back of that bike, him pull out the pedal and stand up and stomp down on that, what looked like a bicycle pedal. And that thing made the most glorious sound. And that probably... it probably rearranged my DNA in ways that have never gone back to what some might call normal since then. As far as dirt bikes, it was a number of years before I got into racing. I got my first motorcycle working for it for 65 cents an hour at the Sonic Drive-In, 1970 model Honda CL70. And took it to the Boy Scout meeting that night. Didn't really know how to ride it very well, but I did manage to do a donut. I'd seen someone on television do that, and that impressed all the girls. And I realized I wanted to keep working on my skills after that point because, it was all about the girls. So I did. And evidently it worked because I have Susan now. So,
yeah.
Interesting thing about the relationship that Susan and I have, it really did start around motorcycles. Our first date was on the Harley Davidson 2001 Dyna Sport. If this were video version, then you would see it behind me there, my shoulder, and it ends up that you are videoing it. So we did our first date, took our first date on that Dyna Sport. But interestingly, at both being writers, we were given an opportunity to write a story for Roadrunner magazine. I don't know, 2 or 3 years back, I guess. And Susan had the idea of making that story about a young couple that she had read about in a book called I Married Adventure. And a woman named Osa Johnson and her husband, Martin Johnson, she eloped. They were married when she was 16. This was back in the, early 20s, Susan?
It was actually around 1910.
Oh, around 1910. Okay, excuse me. And they ultimately went to Africa and South America together, exploring and filming native tribes who had many never seen a white man before, or very many people at all outside of their station there. And she found this book, which was written in the 40s, I Married Adventure. And when we were asked to do this story, we came up with the idea of a title for the story called We Married Adventure. And we had just rebuilt this Harley Davidson motor and got it up and running after about 13 or 14 year hiatus. And we used that on the trip rather than one of the offered motorcycles to do the trip on. And it was pretty iconic of our lives and the adventures that we've been able to enjoy, motorcycles, overlanding, and otherwise since we met.
Awesome. Yeah, it made me think of, just listening to you there, made me think of how I came to be familiar with you too, was through an article, not about motorcycles. And I'm trying to remember if it was a Land Rover or a Land Cruiser that you guys were, I think, to put it kindly, we'll say you were struggling with at the time.
Was it a video or an article?
It was an article.
That would have, Susan, would that have been in
An Overland Journal or Expedition Portal, probably.
Yeah, probably Overland Journal.
And that was a 1976 FJ40. Go ahead, Susan.
No, I was just going to say, that was the FJ40.
Yeah. And it was through that article and some of the things that you said about the FJ40, I saw my own struggles at the time. I was struggling with a motorcycle that I couldn't quite track down all of the gremlins in it. I would get it going and it would be great for 15 minutes or 15 days, and then something else would go wrong. And so I really connected with how you guys were traveling at that point. And it was a good article too, by the way. Good photographs, good words, as is everything in Overland Journal. They have a really high level of quality. So, but your name is associated much more with training, especially through the Overland expos. Excuse me, that word just popped out of my head for a second. And I think that I always think of Bill Dragoo and Dart. It sounds like a superhero team.
It is. It is a superhero team. But it's sort of the basic Mr. Magoo, for those who remember Mr. Magoo, leading this team. But the team itself gets him out of a lot of trouble that he gets himself into. Yeah.
So what was it about the training aspect of motorcycling that drew you in? The ability, especially how did you discover that you had the capacity to help other people improve their riding?
That is a really good question. I've always enjoyed teaching from the time I was a Boy Scout, and had, for a brief time, taught canoeing at one of our summer camps for scouting down at Slippery Falls in southern Oklahoma, southeastern Oklahoma. I liked to teach. I liked to impart whatever it was that I knew on others. It bolstered my ego. It made me feel good about helping someone else better themselves. I mean, it did all the things that a young man, and now an older man, really needs, I think, wants and needs to be fulfilled, to feel fulfilled. And so when I was, I had a bit of a hiatus from motorcycle riding during the raising of my three boys. And then, because someone was badly injured who worked for me, et cetera, et cetera. So I just got rid of them, got into sailing, got back into the motorcycles. And then Susan and I, when we got together, she encouraged me to get back into dirt bikes. We had the Harley Davidson, and that was it. And so we got a little dirt bike, and each of us got one. And then she wound up with a BMW, one of the early F650 GS models, which was at that time, before the G650, it was the single cylinder. The Fs were then single before they became twins, for those who are listening who are BMW aficionados and want to keep me accurate. So I actually qualified for the Adventure Rider Challenge, the Rawhide Adventure Rider Challenge in 2008. Let me step back one. I entered that as a journalist to cover the event for ADV Moto magazine, and won the event, 3-day event. And I did very well. And through mixing some old trials skills and old motocross skills and things, I just came out on top of a pretty good bunch of guys and gals who had entered that. And that got me known by BMW Motorrad. So then is when Susan's BMW came into play. You had to be an owner to compete for the GS Trophy competition, which the first was that year in 2008. And so her bike was the pass card, if you will. for that, and very soon bought my own BMW, a couple of different ones. But I wound up representing our country in the GS Trophy in 2010. And through that and the recognition both there and with the writing, I began to get invitations to do things, first in South America and then in the United States, which is kind of an odd mix, but just through the pathways and the way they work for us, I wound up developing a curriculum. That curriculum I did initially for Skip Mascoro of Moto Discovery. Mm-hmm. And Skip is very well known in the moto scene, one of the longest running tour operators in the United States or in the world even probably. And using that curriculum to start teaching there in Bolivia, then in Colombia, then here in Oklahoma, of all places. And immediately when I started applying the curriculum, I realized that it worked. I mean, I had developed this pretty much on my own. I ended up attending a class with Jimmy Lewis, again, to cover a story for him. And I realized that also a lot of the things that Jimmy did were very similar to what I would do. And it occurred to me that physics is physics. Motorcycles are motorcycles. This is not rocket surgery. It is basically doing what works. And then ultimately I went to Germany, to Heckington, Germany in 2017, became certified through BMW Motorrad as an international off-road instructor for BMW or under their banner. And just the beat goes on. I mean, people keep coming, and the reputation, it seems to be good enough that we managed to stay afloat somehow. And it's just gotten busier and busier every day, really. I think we've registered half a dozen students, more than that in the past, since about noon yesterday.
Awesome.
So, yeah, it just keeps going. So.
Well, and how did you guys get involved with the Overland Expo? Because I know that's been going on for several years. My involvement with it didn't start until last year, 2021. So that's kind of when I started learning all about it and the motorcycle training that you guys offer at the Expo events. So tell me a little bit about how that came around.
Well, that, I guess, still goes to me as far as that question, Susan. But so back in, 2009 or so, maybe 2010, it was the second Overland Expo, as I recall.
Okay.
I went as a journalist again. So, the mantra, ride to live, live to ride. Well, for me, it's ride to write, write to ride. Writing was my passcard. And Jonathan and Roseanne Hansen were good enough to comp us in that event as journalists. We wrote a number of pieces relative to that event, just for publicity for them. And I discovered a whole new world in this overlanding community. I mean, it was stuff I had done all my life with Jeeping and the old FJ40 Land Cruisers. I had owned both Jeeps and Land Cruisers. I'd worked as a service manager for Jeep. And, so I had an extensive background in the off-road four-wheel community, in addition to and parallel to my flying and motorcycle career. But Susan began to come with me after about the second or about the third event, I guess it is, sweetheart?
Yeah, I think it was the third.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And Susan came right in as a photographer and began to do things for them in the photography arena. Of course, we collaborate on virtually everything that we do.
Yeah.
Her photography, my writing. She is a professional editor, which is great. Although I apologize to those who are getting this unedited. Susan can fix it for me later. But that's the problem with talking. But anyway, so eventually through DART, Eva Rupert asked if I would come in and begin to run the motorcycle training program for Overland Expo. This has been some 4 years or so ago. Is that right, Susan?
Okay.
It was fall of 2017.
Okay, 17, 18 months.
So going on 5 years, yeah.
Well, this would be our 6th year in that case. So
we didn't have one in...
Didn't do one in 17, but yeah, okay, so 5 years of Overland Expos, and they've evolved from the one in Amato, Arizona, which is my first, to now the 4 across the United States.
Yeah. And is DART going to be at all 4 Overland Expos this summer?
Lord willing, that's what we'll do. That's the plan. We've been requested to do that. And as long as they will have us, then I suppose that's what we'll continue to support for them.
Yes. And I should fix that. I'll self-edit. All four of them are not in the summer. This is 2022 when we're talking, and one of them is in October. The Overland East is in October in Virginia. The other three are in the summer, May, June, or May, July, and August.
Right. So we have next week, in fact, a week from yesterday, this coming Monday, we will be leaving for Overland Expo West in Flagstaff.
Yep.
And we'll do our setup there for a few days. We'll be also riding the Yamaha 700 Tenere, which they have improved in multiple ways as their quote ultimate overlanding motorcycle or two-wheel overlander machine. We did a story for them last year on their the Africa Twin. But then that one is so that's in May, and then in July we have Overland Expo Pacific Northwest, which this will be the first year. It will be done in, I believe it's in Redmond, Oregon.
That's correct.
And then we have multiple events across the United States that we'll be doing in South Dakota, Vermont, Virginia, etc. But we'll skip from there back to in October Overland Expo Mountain West. Excuse me, in August.
August, right?
There was my editor stepping in. Thank you, Susan. You're totally on the spot.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah. And then, as you suggested there, Wes, in October, we will have Overland Expo East again in Arlington, Virginia.
Yeah, we had last year, the weather was really great, except for the rain that we had most of the day on, I think it was Sunday. But it helped keep things a little cool. October in Virginia can be a little dicey sometimes. But it was a real pleasant weekend. But unfortunately, I was so busy with my own stuff, I didn't get a chance to come out to where the Dart folks were doing their stuff and see what was going on, except for a brief spin on Saturday afternoon. I got a hold of a Zero and just kind of went tooling around the expo grounds, which was fantastic. So I didn't get to meet you. So I'm looking forward to meeting you in Flagstaff. I'm leaving on Monday as well, although I'm going to probably have to put in I'll probably get there after you guys do, because I don't have as much setup to do, which is nice. So Susan, talk to me a little bit about because you guys, this is like the weird convergence of things, because you do all the things that I aspire to do. If one of you played guitar, I would think that maybe we were split off from the same genetic material somewhere. But tell me a little bit about your photography that you do, because I'm constantly trying. I feel like that's one of my weak points, especially because traveling by motorcycle inherently limits the gear that you can take with you. So I'd like to hear a little bit about your approach to photography especially when you're on the road and limited in the amount of things that you can take with you.
Yes, I am a fan of mirrorless cameras. I bought my first mirrorless digital camera 7 years ago now. So that provides wonderful image quality and a much more compact package to carry around whatever you're doing. I actually bought it for a trek I was doing in Iceland, because I just wanted something that was more lightweight than my big SLR. Mm-hmm. So I highly recommend that. And for travel, a lens with a focal length that really gives you a lot of range, because it's great to have a lot of prime lenses and you get wonderful quality photos with that really good glass. But for travel, it's great to have something like an 18 to 135 lens, which is what I carry on my Fuji, which Sony's are great. I know that Canon and Nikon have come out with mirrorless versions of their cameras as well. But so that's one thing to consider.
Yeah. And how do you keep up with the processing while you're traveling, especially on a longer trip? That's where I struggle. I'm good if I'm like, go to the event. I covered Bill mentioned his participation in the GS Trophy which I find an absolutely fascinating event. I don't know how people do that. I have that same motorcycle that they're doing that stuff on, and I can't do that stuff. I watched a guy ride a GS 1200 up a rock, and it would just blew me away because like that's the exact same bike that I have. And I can't do that. But I think I forgot my question. Well,
it was about post-processing, really.
How
to keep that on the road.
If I'm doing a one in back, even if it's like a 2-day event, I get home, go through my stuff, I throw out the junk and I keep the best. And I don't have to do any of my own photography retouching. I have an editor above me who does that when it comes to the photos. But when I'm on the road for a week, I very quickly get behind. And then when I get home after 2 weeks or 5 weeks or however long the trip is, I've got, SD cards and hard drives. And so how do you stay organized and keep ahead of the process is really what I'm kind of trying to find out.
Well, that assumes that I do stay organized and keep ahead of the process. I would have to admit that's a challenge for me as well. And it depends on if we're camping, then it's a lot harder to do a daily download. It's just, I don't know, something about getting my laptop out and dealing with that after setting up camp and cooking dinner and all that. It's just really a challenge mentally, really. Yeah. But if we're not camping, it's fairly easy for me to download images and just put them in a folder. I'm not really as organized like with Lightroom as most people are, and but so I like to do that. I like to get them downloaded, so at least I've got them backed up.
Yeah.
And then I have to admit it does take me some time when I get home to do that. But I do like to sort through as quickly as I can, even on the road, and pick out those really good images that I want to be sure I don't lose track of.
Yeah.
It's a constant effort.
Bill, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, if I may, because Susan is exceedingly humble. 2 words, but then there's some explanation. And one is those 2 words are work ethic. Susan is a very hard worker. She wastes no time. She does have to rest from time to time, but her productive time is extraordinary. Wherever we are, they can be driving down the road in our overlanding rig, even off pavement. She'll be editing stories for a magazine, or editing one of my stories, or working with her photos to sort and do what she needs to do with that. She has, for the past decades, I guess a little bit over, done the photography for DART. We have a young lady now, Jenny Vigil, who is working with us doing the on-site logistics, which includes photography. Susan is currently training her up to do more of that. But those photos need to be transferred to a Dropbox and sent out to our students virtually immediately, because basically while the iron is hot, we want to get those out to the people so they're still excited about the training. They're coming down from the buzz of the training and they're looking for these photos, these amazing images, incredible images of themselves going from dragging their feet around, putting both feet down every time they stop, leaning into a turn as though they would on the pavement, to counterbalancing the motorcycle, standing tall, 2 fingers on the clutch and brake, head and eyes into the turn, looking and riding well. You can see that. Susan captures that, and now Jenny captures that throughout the 2 days of training, or 4 if they stay for our level 3 training. And so she is actually quite organized, and she works hard at it to get that done. So I think it's a matter of diligence. It's a matter of work ethic and skill and knowledge. She's faster than probably most people at doing what she does. And it's hard work and dedication.
Yeah. You got quite a cheerleader there, Susan.
I know. He's pretty wonderful.
Well, just said, see, that's why she's an editor. She just said in a couple of words what it took me like 3 or 4 or 5 sentences or maybe a couple of paragraphs to say.
Yeah.
It's pretty wonderful.
Well, and I think one of the things that you guys probably have, and I should stop saying guys because you're not both guys. I apologize for that. My younger daughter castigated me for deferring to calling everybody guys a couple of weeks ago, and so I'm trying to adjust my speech patterns.
Not a problem.
The two of you, I think, have a little bit of a unique perspective in that you overland on both 2 wheels and 4. So, I have only recently become aware through Overland Journal, incidentally, in the last few years of the idea of traveling in a vehicle with 4 wheels. I've been on motorcycles for so long that I think the last time I took a family vacation in a car, my daughter was 2. Usually we end up, they take a car and I take a motorcycle and we meet up somewhere. So I'm really curious to hear about how you guys approach overlanding on 2 wheels versus 4, because I've got you here and I know you do both. And all I can think of in my head is, well, the loadout's going to be different, but that's the easy thing for me to come up with. So if you guys would talk to me a little bit about that, or even talk to each other, and I'll just listen.
Well, Susan, can I bring this up? Honey, we need to talk.
Sure. I'm not sure if that's the question he's asking, though.
Well, it's how do we do both? But to address the 2-wheel overlanding element of what we do, Susan, as a historian, we travel to numerous places that she wants to go and explore, to learn about, to research. And some of it was on Native American history. And we followed many of the places where Quanah Parker, the last Comanche chief, Quanah Parker, had traveled and lived. And we did a lot of that two-up on our BMW. And we've done a lot of two-up on our Harley-Davidson as well. And there's a story on my website. My website is billdragoo.com, pretty easy to find. And under publications called Honey, We Need to Talk. And it was a column that we did for Roadrunner magazine. And it basically addresses her being on back with me when I'm acting out, just to say the least. But due to some of those antics, and also because of the necessity of our overlanding community, we've had to do both, as you suggest. So to get to Overland Expo, we trailer out. I mean, there's no shame in that for us. We've been around and done enough of this and that, but we don't feel compelled to ride our motorcycle everywhere we go, nor can we carry everything that we have to for training. So for Overland Expo, as we did last year, Susan will follow me. We have a built 4Runner. It's a heavily built overlanding, almost rock crawling rig. And she is quite adept at driving that. And she will follow me, not so much as support, but as a photographer and my partner for our travels in that rig as I ride the motorcycle. And granted, the motorcycle is faster, but because we don't push the miles too much in a day, we're out there to enjoy what we do, to capture the stories. And so we work together on that. And it works fine for us. So that's the long version of my take. Susan could probably sum that up in a couple of words, but take all you want.
Well, I just wanted to add that we used to do more touring together on our own motorcycles. So we did some long trips with each of us riding our own motorcycle. And then just as Bill got more and more just at the heights of technical skill that he is, it was more and more challenging for me to keep up with him. And it became kind of stressful. I mean, he was very patient, but I felt like I was probably causing him some frustration, having to deal with some of the anxieties that I was actually experiencing on some of those trips. And at one point I suggested to him that we get an overlanding vehicle and build an overlanding vehicle, a 4-wheel drive vehicle, so that it would be less stressful for me and still fun for him because we could go some really gnarly places in a really cool 4-wheel drive vehicle, which I knew he liked. And so we bought a 2011 Tacoma and built it. And that was really the genesis of the overlanding that we do now together. And we've got a different vehicle now. And of course, we've got the FJ40 as well. But that has been wonderful. We have done so much. And I can't say that I don't ever have any anxiety because he likes to go some really crazy places that I'm always going, no, we're not going to go there. No, we're not going to go there. And then we do go there. And so far it's been okay, but we have a lot of fun doing that together. And I think that's been a great transition. He still does a lot of motorcycle touring, and it's so that works great. And when we're not doing the 4-wheel drive overlanding together, or he's not doing his 2-wheel adventures, I do quite a bit of backpacking and hiking. So that's kind of one of my outlets now. Yeah.
So is it the it all just sounds so very rugged. I try to imagine that kind of life, and it's hard for me because I'm not a rugged person like that. But that does make me wonder if that ties into your current research on the stagecoach routes that you're working on. Because I feel like you probably can, walk, drive, or ride most of these, old time stagecoach routes. So tell me a little bit about your research and the book you're working on.
Yes, it does tie into that. And partly because at one point, it was actually when we read back in probably 2012 or around that time frame, the book Empire of the Summer Moon, which was about Quanah Parker and the Comanche people, and realized that they were right there in Oklahoma where we live, and that we could go out and experience some of that same land and write about it. And because I was always looking for other genres to write, and and that was actually, we'd been writing for motorcycle magazines for some time, and I was really wanting to break into some other genres. And so we did start doing that. And Bill mentioned that we wrote about these Comanche trails, and it was it's so fun because we get to go out and explore these rugged places, and then we write about it, and I take pictures, and it's all good. What could be wrong with that? And so that evolved into other historic trails. I would, as I would do more research, I would continue to discover these trails and historic places right in our home state. And eventually I landed on the Butterfield Overland Mail Stagecoach route, which, as Bill mentioned, it ran from 1858 to 1861. And it was the first transcontinental mail route in the United States. And it was before the Civil War. It was before the telegraph. It was before the Transcontinental Railroad. And prior to that time, to get from the East Coast of the United States to the West Coast, you would have to take a steamship and take a long ocean journey.
Yeah.
Or take a very, very long wagon ride. Anyway, everything was fraught with danger and took a long time. But because of the gold rush, the 1849 gold rush, there was a huge population shift. So anyway, not to belabor the history of that, we started retracing the 200 miles of that stagecoach route that went through Indian Territory. It was Indian Territory at the time. And found that there's a tremendous amount that can still be seen of that. And I have felt compelled to retrace that to the degree possible and write about it. It just feels to me like it's something that needs to be written about, and the history of that and what remains of it preserved. And so it's kind of become a compulsion for me. We've been actually working on that since 2016, and I'm in the process of finishing a manuscript of a book on that. So we'll see where that goes, but it's just something I really enjoy, and it's like a treasure hunt constantly.
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the things that people don't realize about the work that historians do is a lot of times it starts with a tiny idea and you start pulling at that thread, and it leads you from one resource to another resource to somebody who has this thing that, to somebody that has that thing. And all of a sudden you're able to put all these pieces together and connect, two things that are 150 or 200 years apart. And it really is it probably sounds trite for me to say it, but it's a magical feeling to be able to connect that in your own head. And then it's even more so to be able to share it with people. So I understand that. I've done a little work in history myself, so I get where you're coming from. Although I study primarily European history and not American history. It's one of the things that my professors always criticized me for, was not being more rounded and not knowing more U.S. history. I know at this point just enough to teach college freshmen what they need to know about U.S. history to pass the class, which it's even been a while since I taught that class. But I feel like there's probably a lot of our modern cultural existence that subconsciously ties back to, what our images of life in the 1850s were probably like, that American idealism that existed back then, is still, that idea of the front of taking on the frontier and, taming the wilderness and all that kind of stuff, I think still permeates our culture to a high extent, even if we don't understand it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that so much of that is just something that we aren't conscious of, but yet it's an integral part of our culture, and it's fun to actually explore the origins of those things.
Yeah, well, very cool. Do you have any idea when the book might be ready? Is it still a couple years out?
Well, I have a book proposal into a publisher right now with a potential completion date for the manuscript of the end of this year. So that's my deadline right now.
Gotcha.
And it'll stay my deadline, whatever the decision of that publisher is. And if that one doesn't work out, I'll move forward in another way. But yeah, no, I'm really well into it. It's going along well. Good.
I'm glad to hear that. Not to leave you out of the conversation, Bill, I just had to geek out on the history stuff there with Susan for a minute. What outside of the context of the Overland Expo, what does DART offer riders for classes? Yeah. Do you? What I'm trying to find out is, do you have like a training arena, or do you just go to events and work there? How does it all work?
We do have a local arena. I did have a lingering comment.
Sure.
I'm sure that's shocking for you by now. And regarding your mention of ruggedness, and you said that you felt at a different scale on that ruggedness, maybe against what some of what you heard. I will tell you, there is a hierarchy of ruggedness, and there are definitely different levels of that ruggedness. And to put it in perspective, I am at a certain level on that hierarchy. You, who does not even own an automobile and rides a motorcycle everywhere you go, are definitely at a whole new level of that, up more towards the stratosphere and beyond, relative to where I see myself in ruggedness. I don't like to be too cold or too hot. I will for the right reasons, but I also like good gear, so I try to minimize the effects of the ruggedness around me.
Yeah.
But then there is Susan, and when we talked about revisiting and the magic of these historical areas and situations and lifestyles of people who lived in a completely different, not only time, but just circumstance than what we could probably truly imagine. And with the things that we would probably, many of us would probably die if we didn't have, or if we had to live under those conditions now. So Susan puts herself in those situations deliberately. There's a botanist named Thomas Nuttall who lived many years ago. but he was scouting a trail from Fort Smith, or actually from St. Louis, I suppose, wasn't it, Susan?
Well, yeah, he actually started in Philadelphia, but yeah.
Philadelphia, yeah. Up the river system to the Rocky Mountains and beyond. And part of that went up the Arkansas River. And his foray began in August. Now, if you've not been in Oklahoma in August, you're one of the wiser people that I know. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't recommend that. But Susan went to the actual places. She found a handprint of Thomas Nuttall where it was. Okay, tell me how that worked, Susan.
It was a handprint of an early day Cherokee. So, but yeah, it was a very cool handprint.
Which like in the mud or something?
It was in the stone. It was a carved handprint in the
stone.
That's cool.
On the Arkansas River, yeah.
But this was on Thomas Nuttall's route, I believe. Mm-hmm. And there were some other markings and other indications. But she literally had to wade through briars, brush, swamps, all of this. And she's done this multiple times, but she's tried to do this under the exact circumstances that Thomas Nuttall experienced during that time. And that's just one. I mean, she'll wade chest deep in water when it's 45 degrees outside just to get that angle on a photo that she wants to take.
Yeah.
And I realize I'm bragging on her a little bit, but it's...
As you should.
Who was it? Will Rogers that said, it ain't bragging if it's fact.
That's right.
So that's where we stand on that. But so there's the hierarchy for you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So what does DART do besides events? Well, the events are a byproduct of our training. The training is not something that's an addendum to the events that we do. We've been blessed to be a part of Overland Expo as long as we have, and to be recognized by them for what we do. My son Ben is coming into DART extensively now, and Lord willing, he'll carry the torch. I mean,
yeah.
And beyond whenever I decide to ease back or to stop or whatever might happen with that, which I don't have any intention of stopping in the very near future by any means. But our primary venue is here in Oklahoma, and we run through June. So our last class for the summer is actually coming up shortly after Overland Expo, June 3rd, and then the several days following that for our levels 1 and 2, which is fundamentals through hills. And then our level 3, which is a separate 2-day class, which is rocks and sand. And we have a shop day in between where we teach people the basics of trailside maintenance, emergency repairs, the philosophy of bike preparation, et cetera.
Very handy.
Very handy and very well attended. And, we get good reviews on that. So we survey every student afterwards, after every class, and we take every word to heart from those students. We've been very fortunate to see a lot of good marks there. Pretty much everything has been 5 stars as far as the star ratings, but there have been recommendations from the students as to thises and that's that we heed. So right here in Oklahoma, 12 minutes from our home is our primary venue. And then our level 3 is an hour from our home down in the Arbuckle Mountains and at a place called Soggy Bottom Trails. The Arbuckles are over 500 million years old. There's one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world. And so they're like me. They've got a lot of crags and crannies and marks of age and time, but they still have a lot to show for themselves. And so that works really well for. Go ahead, babe.
That's actually Crossbar Ranch down there.
What did I say?
Soggy Bottom. You said Soggy Bottom.
Soggy Bottom is the other one. Crossbar Ranch is day 1, the Rocks Day, and that's in the Arbuckles. Soggy Bottom is on the Canadian River, also about an hour from our home. So all of these things take place, or what we call local training takes place within an hour. And then we do outlying events. We do a lot of collaborations with tour companies. I mentioned Moto Discovery, Skip Store. We've done a lot with him, also with Alex Moore, who has worked with Moto Discovery for a long time. A lot of the stuff out west in Utah and some in Colorado. We worked with Colorado Motorcycle Adventures, Scott Lee. Goodness, now I started mentioning names, so I'll probably forget some. But in Vermont, we've worked with Eric Milano of Moto Vermont. Does a wonderful job with what we call immersion tours up there and elsewhere. Mike, High Sega Adventure Lodge with Mike and Tara Flannery in South Dakota in the Black Hills. Dusty Wessels, good friend who has West 38 Moto.
Yeah.
Dusty and I do collaborations on both training and tours. We've done them in Colorado and also in California and on down into Baja. My son has worked with J.J. Lewis with the Good Adventure Company. So we don't see others who do what we do as competition. We refuse to accept that, and we do not act that way regardless of how they may portray themselves or us. We feel like the rising tide floats all boats. We're all in this business together, and our mission is to provide it from DART. Our mission is to provide quality, affordable off-road training to anyone who wants to improve their skills. We have scholarships and other things that we can provide for people who need help with the tuition cost. Even though our tuition is some of the lowest in the industry, we still realize that not everyone can afford it, and we want to make it available. So BMW helps us with that. They provide some of the scholarships. Our good friend Ted Leslie with myBikerAttorney.com also provides a series of scholarships for us each year, and then we fund a portion of those scholarships also. So we do try to get some buy-in from the students so that they have some skin in the game, but we make it easy and affordable for them.
Nice. Susan, you had wanted to add something in there?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, a shout out to Waylon Wayne Weekend. Chad
Warner.
Warner.
And Chad Warner, for heaven's sake. Golly, he would have absolutely shot me. And I apologize if I've missed someone, and I'm sure I have, that we've worked with. But we also do what we call DART Camp. DART Camp is our Christian Adventure Motorcycle Project. Susan and I were walking home from church several months ago. I guess it's been more than a year ago now. It's hard to believe it's been that long. Our church is a few blocks from our home. And we wanted to do something to give back to the community that has given us so much in what's supposed to be our retirement. We work harder than we did, or at least I worked harder than I did when I was working full time. Susan worked hard her whole life. But so we wanted to do some outreach, some giving back. And we reached out to a friend of ours, Vernon Bryant, who is a pastor at a church assistant pastor at a church in San Antonio. And Vernon has been extraordinary to help us with our Christian Adventure Motorcycle Project. He even bought property in Del Norte, or near Del Norte, Colorado, in the Rio Grande National Forest to facilitate a staging spot for our camps. And we base what we do there on the same thing that we base our off-road training. And that is what we call the 4 cornerstones of adventure riding. They are balance, control, judgment, and attitude. 2 are more physical, more kinesthetic, the balance and control aspect of our riding motorcycles and of our lives. 2 are more mental and of the heart, judgment, and attitude. So if you can imagine a session of riding motorcycles in the magnificent countryside around the Rio Grande National Forest, and then coming back in the evening to a beautiful setting, also a campfire setting, and then having sessions where we discuss the spiritual realm of balance, control, judgment, and attitude. So those are some of the things we're involved in. There's more, and it goes on and on. And I don't want to monopolize, but those are all worth mentioning. Yeah,
and I think a lot of people forget about the mental aspects of riding involve more than just knowing where the apex is and remembering to look through the turn. And I think a lot of people kind of forget that part of it. I know it's certainly easy to get discouraged especially when you're attending a training course, because at least I know from my perspective, I often feel like everybody knows more than I do, and everybody is better at this than I am. And that kind of gets in my head and prevents me probably from being open-minded enough to learn more effectively. So it's good that you address those things too.
Wes, you nailed it. I do a column for Ride Texas magazine called Dart Tips. This is a regular column, recurring column. Do another one for Outdoor by 4 magazine called Treadmarks, and they have slightly different approaches on these columns. But one of my recent columns for Ride Texas was about fear, and it's called Slaying Dragons. We all deal with that fear. And I talk about in the article as something that I talk about in most of our classes also, and that is the limiting factor that fear is. Fear actually drives us towards fatigue. Fatigue is probably the number one limiting factor, really. But fear is a big one. And fear makes us feel tired, so it's certainly a big element. But knowledge overcomes fear. If you imagine yourself walking down an alley and it's nighttime, or walking down a street and it's nighttime and you pass an alley, and looking down that alley, your ear is drawn, your eye is drawn by this popping and these flashes of light and these screams. The average person would feel fearful at that point and probably not go to investigate unless you're a trained professional in that arena. But suddenly the lights come on and you look down that alley again and you see young boys and girls, and they're throwing firecrackers at one another, and they're yelling, and they have a jump house in there. Our paradigm completely changed at that point, and knowledge of what's actually taking place and being done replaces that fear entirely and washes it away so quickly that even the adrenaline goes with it fairly rapidly. Well, that's what training does for you. And, for yourself and for anyone else who feels and has felt that fear, I would encourage them to find a good school. There are good ones and there are bad ones, but find a good school with a good reputation for helping and for overcoming that fear and for nurturing and bringing people along at a balanced rate. It isn't the same for everyone, even though our curriculum is a fairly straightforward curriculum. It's a tall ladder with closely spaced rungs. And we work on overcoming fears, building confidence so that the next level is, it may be a trust step, but it's there because they trusted the last one and felt success.
Yeah.
So the beat goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up for this episode. Bill and Susan, I want to thank you very much for joining us. Before we go, I do want to give you the opportunity to plug your website. You mentioned BillDragoo.com earlier for your writing. Susan, do you have a similar website for your writing that you want to tell us about?
I do. It's SusanDragoo.com. So very, very easy to remember. And the BillDragoo.com is not only for Bill's writing, but it's for the DART registrations and all the information there.
Well, that answers my next question then. I will see you guys in Flagstaff in about a week and a half or so. And I'll see you in Redmond and Loveland, Colorado as well for the other Overland Expos this summer. I very much look forward to it. Thanks so much for taking time out of your lives to join us here on Chasing the Horizon. It means a lot to me when people do this. So I really want you to know how much I appreciate it.
Thank you, Wes, for having us. We appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, Wes.
Visit our website at chasingthehorizon.us to listen to every episode of the podcast and read up on various motorcycle-related topics. And ride along with us on the internet. Chasing the Horizon is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. There's a mailing list with exclusive content and giveaways that are only open to subscribers. You can sign up for that at tinyletter.com/chasingthehorizon. We'll see you out there somewhere on the road or off it. Ride safe.